Hello again everyone. So in this video I will be teaching you to make a face mask because as of recently we've all been in situations where we probably need one. So I thought I would make one that is woodland themed with embroidery and patchwork. So if that's what you're into, you've come to the right place. So here's what it'll end up looking like. Well, at least that's what mine ended up looking like using the materials that I had. So what I used was I bought this little patchwork quilting fabric in a bundle from Spotlight, which you can probably get at any sewing store really. And alongside that I had embroidery hoops, which are optional, embroidery thread, cotton for the machine or for hand stitching, pins to hold everything in place, and probably like measuring tape and scissors and just your usual sewing stuff, as well as some elastic so that you can actually put it on your face. I also had some ribbon, which is also optional. I just thought I'd use some for the trim. You could also, if you wanted to, get some stretch fabric to cover up the elastic if you don't like the look of the elastic, or you can use ribbon or some sort of string as a tie, as some kind of alternative to elastic if you didn't want to use that. So I started off with just cutting out random shapes in the fabric, so little squares and rectangles of various sizes, and then laying them out together to make my patchwork pattern. And then I worked out how big the mask would be, like what size the fabric would be, and then laid it out on top of another piece of fabric. And I had researched what was a suitable amount of layers to have for a mask for it to work well, and what I found was that around 4 layers is really good for protecting you from bacteria and whatnot in the air, to stop you from getting sick, obviously. So what we did was we decided to have the outer layer, which was the patchwork, and then an inner layer of fabric, and then a couple of plain layers of fabric in between to make that up. So this is the arrangement I made, and then these are the 2 pieces of plain fabric that I put in between. And so after I put the arrangement together, I started sewing them together with the machine by placing the right sides together and then sewing over the wrong sides, if that makes sense. So the blank sides of the fabric, and then turning it back out and just going over it with each part, which can be a bit fiddly. So if you're not confident with doing that, I would recommend hand stitching them together, which might look a little bit messier depending on your stitching style. To cover up that messiness though, you can use embroidery thread to put in a couple of stitches to just distract from whatever's going on with like the cotton, and because it's a thicker thread you're not going to notice so much, and maybe use like a brighter color to distract from it, which I'll probably show you later so that you actually understand what I'm trying to explain. This was when I finished putting it together. It took me a really long time and I was kind of losing it because I was helping everyone else do theirs as well. I was really excited to finally get it done. After I finished putting that together, I cut out my backing piece, which I used a patterned piece so it looked nice, and then just ran the sewing machine along the doubled over edges to sort of like hem it, make it more secure so it wouldn't fray, because with masks you're going to be putting them through the wash quite frequently to keep them clean and hygienic, and you don't want that fraying and coming on undone. You want something that's more secure. Don't forget to wash your fabric beforehand as well, before you start making the mask. Just like it works better with the fabric, so it doesn't like shrink later. It also makes it clean, which is nice during these times. I did a similar kind of thing with the inside fabric, the plain fabric, to go between the front and back, but I cut these slightly smaller so that you wouldn't see them, like it wouldn't stick out from the edges, and then I attached the elastic. So I just hand stitched that on, and yeah, that was an experience. And I think I made mine slightly too tight, so it pulls my ears forward, so just be careful with that, but at the same time you don't want it too loose because then it's not going to protect you. I forgot to mention, I think the dimensions that we decided on for the masks was around 9 inches across the face, maybe 8.5, around 8.5, 9 inches across the face for an adult-sized mask. And then around 5.5 to 6 inches vertical, but this is quite large. You do need to put darts in it or some kind of system to hold it in place, but you also do need that excess so that you can alter the mask so that it fits your face better, because obviously our faces have noses and whatnot, and we've got chins that stick out, so it's an awkward shape. Your face isn't just flat like a pan, so you will need that excess to alter it later. So once I had all these pieces ready to go, it was time to do the embroidery on the front, because obviously you don't want to embroider through all the layers and have it showing through the back. You want that kind of closed in between layers and hidden. So I started off doing that. What I did first was just draw a little silhouette of a deer and just kind of work with it. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was loving it. So yeah, I knocked most of it out in the first night, and then the next morning I did the rest. I started on doing some little leaf decorations around it, sort of like branches with leaves on them, just to complete it, because I liked the kind of circular look that the hoop was creating, and I wanted to kind of keep with that shape. I ended up using a curved bookbinding needle, because I couldn't find one with an eye big enough for the embroidery thread. So I just settled for that, which I actually liked better. I found it easier to stitch without getting things tangled using the curved needle, and also you can stitch kind of faster, I guess, because you can just pull the whole thing through very easily without going in and then back out. Here's the finished embroidered piece, and now I'll be showing you how I put the rest of it together. I embroidered little crosses and stitches, and also had a little visitor. I put the top layer, the two middle layers with the elastic and the lining all together, and then pinned them where the elastic was because that pulls on the fabric and shortens it. So I pinned all of that and then sewed it all together. This is what it looked like when I'd put it all together, and then I had to pleat it so that it'll fit across the face properly. And I tried a different couple of ways of doing this, but I found that this way worked best, folding the top part and bottom part both inward, because it wasn't covering the embroidered design in the middle. You can use a fork to do this if you want it to be precise, but I didn't. I just used my fingers, and then pinned it in place and sewed it down. And then I think I sewed it across as well because it wasn't tight enough, so I sewed a little seam horizontally across, but not all the way across. Just probably about 1.5 inches, maybe less. I then tried the mask on to see where I needed to adjust it so it would fit my face, and found that it was a tiny little bit too long, but just needed to be adjusted around the nose and chin. By just putting darts in there, really, I just like pinched the fabric at the back, making 2 tiny little triangles, and sewed along those with the front against itself. And that pulled it in the right way so that it fit my face properly. And then I was able to sew on the ribbon to cover the raw edges. This is of course the finished mask again, and I will show you what it ends up looking like on. I was pretty happy with the mask. I ended up going to the Black Lives Matter protest in Melbourne the next day, and it was great. Like, I could breathe really well, while it was, of course, filtering my air. I ended up using another mask, like a regular mask later on, which made it extremely hard to breathe. Like, I felt asthmatic wearing it, and that was just a basic 1-layer mask, but I think it was synthetic fabric, so I'd recommend using cotton if you're going to try and do this. Also, I wouldn't recommend trying to do it in one night like we did. It was not the most fun time. But I hope this gave you some ideas, some inspiration, and you'll be able to make your own. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Gosh, you'd think we'd had a party in here.
Your bird calls are on video.
Wow, would you look at that? I'm so gone. Yeah, there we go. That's all.
Beauty.